Hello and welcome to episode number 95 of the WP Café show with me, Keith Devon, and my co-host, Mark Wilkinson. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you along. Today, we're mostly going to be talking WordPress 6.6, I think, as well as audience questions and comments. As always, let's try to get a little discussion going on in the YouTube comments. It's always fun. On that note, if you're following us along on YouTube and you're live, do say hello. Thanks for being here. Do consider subscribing and liking the video if you do like this kind of show and this kind of content. We really appreciate that. You can also catch us on X at WP Cafe Show, and our website is wpcafe.show. You can find all the previous shows there. Mark, how are you doing today?
I am very well. It's a beautiful day up here in the northwest of England. It is 24 degrees. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit for our American listeners, but it's nice anyway, so it's good. Had a good week, had a good day. Had a call this morning that was quite exciting about potential new provider for Job Relay, so we can integrate like another partner to pull jobs from their systems into people's WordPress sites. So I've just been having a quick look at that this morning. It looks really exciting. Nice to get stuck into some development work, so that'll be good. So been a good week. What about you?
Good. Did a few rack press integrations or builds, more design kind of feedback on the school website. So that is the wireframe stage of that is now signed off, and the design team will be moving into the design phase. So I'm intrigued to see what they come up with. Looking forward to seeing that site take shape, and most of all, looking forward to us being able to actually get properly started. It feels like it's been a long wait. We were hoping to kind of have a lot of the site kind of done by now, but c'est la vie. That's the way it is. It's all good. WordPress 6.6, Mark. It's here. Lots of our stuff auto updated. We've got lots of shiny new features, or not in some cases.
Tim will be proud of our auto updates. Hello, Tim.
Exactly.
I can see you watching.
Lots of people will be horrified. Some people will love it. But
I attend the build mode, which is like WP Engine sort of like developer chat thing on a Friday afternoon. This was a few weeks ago now. We were talking about updates and things, and I was like, "Oh, we just auto update everything," and everyone was like, "Auto update everything? You can't do that, you know." And I was like, "Yeah, we just auto update everything. It's fine." Until it isn't, which with WordPress
until it isn't, which it wasn't.
It wasn't. Well, I say it wasn't. I mean, like the websites were still up. You could still read all the content. Like they just didn't look quite right because there were some issues with. Well, I'll let you describe what the issues were, because I must admit I still don't quite fully understand. It's to do with like variables being output for things and not being defined and stuff, but I don't quite understand it because it's all geeky CSS stuff. So
I was
trying to explain what was broken.
I was supposed to have found a GitHub ticket that I haven't actually found. So if you're on a little monologue at some point, Mark, I'm going to do a little Googling and find something. Anyway, with 6.6 comes a change in CSS specificity. And I don't know exactly why this change was made. We'll come to that. But what has happened is that the default, like the core custom variables that WordPress outputs for things like typography, spacing, colors, etc. So if you define, like using theme JSON, if you define your font sizes and your color palette and your kind of spacing rules and things like that, those used to be scoped to the body element. So, I mean, and that's fine. I mean, nothing lives above the body element on a web page, so you'd think that's absolutely fine. Since the start of custom variables, though, the kind of standard approach has been to scope things to the root. I'm not exactly sure why. I guess because they're properly global. Then there's no level above that. So they're properly global. For some reason, they didn't decide to do that when they first introduced.
Just for the layman's in the room like me, when you say scope, what does that mean? Like, what does scoping a variable to an element mean?
Yeah. So if I have a module called CTA card. The class is like CTA-card. Okay.
Right.
I can write .cta-card, open my curly brackets, and then I can create a custom variable, custom property, within that. And I can't use that custom property outside of that.
Outside of that.
Yeah. So I don't, it'll say it's not defined.
Right. So again, from my understanding, limited understanding of CSS anymore, why would these custom variables, or whatever they're called, that WordPress is generating for, and I believe this was the case, colors, fonts, spacing rules.
Yeah.
Why would they be defined at the body level then? Presumably, everything needs the ability to use them.
Well,
so surely they should be defined at root.
At the body level, pretty much they are available to everything, which was the argument. So there is a GitHub ticket, which I am a participant of, where a few of us were asking this question. Like, why, when kind of it's standard CSS practice, it's not a standard, like it's not you should do that this way, but it was the way that we were encouraged to create custom properties. So WordPress decided not to do it that way, and I don't know why. There wasn't a really good reason on the ticket. Some people came back and said, well, we don't have to. And we're like, well, that's not the point. Why did you change it from something that was kind of the standard way to do it? So anyway, they did. And I don't know why they've had to come back and reverse that, but they have. So and the bit I don't understand, and like I'm sure if I took a few more minutes to figure it out, because I was in a bit of a panic yesterday trying to fix it, so I didn't really get a chance to kind of understand it. But what I ended up having to do is, because everything used to be scoped to body, I'd scoped all of my custom properties to the body as well. And then whenever, this is the bit I don't get, but whenever WordPress moved all theirs to the root, mine didn't work. That's why I'm confused, because they've moved theirs up a level. So why do I not still have access to those? Something like mine are trying to access something that are a level that's too high or something, or vice versa. So I don't know exactly how it happened, but I went through our theme that we use on a few of our websites and changed every time I'd written custom properties and scoped it to the body, I just scoped to the root instead, and it fixed everything.
So your custom variables scoped to the body, we're referencing custom variables that were now scoped to root and previously were scoped to the body.
Yeah, but I don't understand why moving them back up the tree made
because surely if they're down the tree, they should have access to them anyway. So yeah, but it did fix it, didn't it? It seemed to fix it.
I actually do know why. I do know why.
Go on.
So I was creating color variables.
Yeah.
Scoped to the body that I was then referencing in my theme JSON. So it's writing the color CSS and typographic CSS and everything at the root, referencing my custom properties that are at the body, which it doesn't have access to.
Yeah,
something like that.
Because they've not been scoped yet. That makes sense.
Something like that. So
so putting them at the same level makes them work, basically.
Yeah. I know people had, like, there was a common issue about link underlines. So there's some specificity funniness going on with links. I know a friend of ours had that problem. So
has this been a problem for other people then? Yeah, because I know you've been looking into it a lot on X and stuff and posting about it.
Yeah, like, I just posted about it. It got a lot of likes, and a few other people said, yeah, struggling with this today. Yeah, it could be this problem that's affecting a lot of people. So
because the thing that I was aware that was a breaking change was that WordPress is now changing, or has changed in WordPress 6.6, the way that in which it does the default sizes. So they're like small, medium, large, extra large, etc. And it was said that was a breaking change, but because it was a breaking change, it's only they've basically changed the version of theme JSON to the next one, which is 3. So the reason why I wasn't really paying much attention to that, it was that's fine because we'll just leave ours at version 2 and WordPress will just kind of not bother with it. So when this seems to be, and initially I thought, oh, this is going to be that problem, but actually I don't think it is. I don't think it's anything to do with that problem. It's something completely different. In that, but this didn't seem to be documented that this would break stuff.
Yeah, because we tried like adding. So we were using version 1 in our theme JSON.
Yeah,
and then we tried adding in the schema.
Yeah.
To 6.5. That didn't work. So we tried a few things, and then we just realized I actually just needed to go in and change my CSS because none of that reverted the change. So yeah, I mean, it was panic stations for a few minutes, but figured it out reasonably quickly, and not a major impact for us. But there are some other client sites that haven't updated yet to 6.6 that we're going to have to be very careful about. So we're going to have to do some testing around that before we make updates, because I think we're going to have the same kind of problem. Because I've been using, I was using that system for like a period of time. You know, that was my best practice for building sites for a year. So probably most of the sites we built in that period are gonna come across this when they update. Yeah.
Anybody else had any issues with WordPress 6.6? Maybe they're nothing to do with this. Maybe there are other issues. It'd be interesting to see. That's the only issue I've come across in all our sites that I've updated to WordPress 6.6. Nothing else has been flagged to me as an issue anyway that I can see. So I don't know if anyone else has found any other issues or anything, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, apart from that, there are some really good things going on with this release.
Just Elliot says Core notified it was going to happen, but they can't predict what will break. Yeah, I get that. That's what release candidates are for. Yeah, I can't see everyone loading the release candidate on the website.
But that's
I mean, Elliot, I would argue we probably should. You know, that's probably, but everyone else, no, they're not going to do that, are they? Because they probably don't know how to start with.
Yeah. Let's do a few hellos. So hello to Joe, Cameron, Tim, Charlie, Elliot. I think that's it so far in the YouTube comments. Lovely to have you along. Thanks for your comments and greetings. Charlie says, so nobody uses CloudStrike, I assume, as you're here. Yeah, I have wondered every time I've used something to them, like, is it going to work? You know, is Zoom going to work? Is this going to work? Is whatever going to work? So yeah, so far so good.
Interesting. Yeah.
We're
off on holiday shortly, so hope they get us sorted before then.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's move on to the positive changes with 6.6. I think this looks like a really great release. I've been playing with a few things with the Gutenberg plugin in the lead up to it, so I haven't tested every feature that's been released yet, but I've played with a few things, and I just think things do keep moving in the right direction. You can I think there's always frustrations about the implementation and maybe some of the things that haven't been thought through. For example, like Elliot has commented they're personally loving the ability to input negative margins. And we've kind of talked about negative margins before and how they are. I think they're going to be useful in certain circumstances, but from a mobile point of view, like a responsive point of view, I just don't know how that works. I don't know how I can have confidence to say I'm going to shift that to the left.
I think if you do vertical negative margins, then they'll probably work.
But even if you're like doing like a little funky design where like the image and text are offset vertically, but they're side by side, like on desktop, put those on top of each other, one's going to overlap the other. So I think it's a bit of a recipe for disaster, to be honest, to introduce that feature. But I'm sure there's use cases though that aren't so dramatic, where you're just like closing space rather than doing something like a fancy design. You're just using it to like close a gap that you can't close otherwise and things like that. I can see potential uses for that. But
I'm not sure. Some of the examples that I've seen people show, like this is where negative margins are going to work, and I look at the designs and think that doesn't look right.
Yeah,
like it's a feature that users are going to be like, oh, amazing! I can do a negative margin. Look at this, and then when they look at it on mobile, they're going to be like it looks all right, but I want to do this and I can't. So it just seems to me, I don't know. It's a good feature because like you could use it and then put some CSS to fix it on mobile, but for the general public that want to just do stuff in the editor, I'm not sure it might cause more frustrations than it does solve. But we'll see.
Yep. So one of the kind of major features is a grid block, which is really exciting because it's felt like something we've needed since day one. Like if this project had launched with a grid block that actually was decent and worked, I think people would have been like, "Oh yeah, this is cool. Like this is something that we couldn't do before."
Again, for us, front end, whatever the word is, people who don't understand the front end like me, what is the grid block and why is it different from a group block or
so if you could imagine a grid of like 9 squares, so 3 by 3.
Yep.
Typically, you can add content in various different ways in WordPress that would go like in rows across. So you'd have like a bit of content, 1, 2, 3, and then in the next row you have 4, 5, 6, and the next row 7, 8, 9. That kind of stuff is very doable. You can even kind of span things. This is with column blocks. You could just do three columns blocks on top of each other and do things like that. Those don't flow very well for a start. We've had that problem before. Whenever you go from like 3 column layout, and then at a certain break point it does a 2 and a 1, and then a 2 and a 1, and then a 2 and a 1. So that kind of thing. So those things don't flow particularly well. But they're also, what grid allows you to do is take kind of any kind of combination of those, like any rectangle that you can draw over any of those grid cells, you can create as its own content area. So you could have like, there's a good example on the WordPress.org release page for 6.6 where one of the kind of content areas spans 2 vertical grid cells.
Yep.
So you can kind of like drag these areas and kind of create these content areas. It's just, I mean, CSS grid has been around for a really long time and WordPress hasn't really ever utilized it. So this is the first time that we can actually do cool layouts.
And this uses CSS grid as it's
I believe so.
Rendering on the front end. That's how it works.
I think basically it has to, unless it's doing something very fancy with JavaScript. Yeah. I think from what I've heard, the problem with this block is again the lack of responsive controls means that if you start pushing the boundaries a little bit of how you build the grid, the responsive behavior can be really unpredictable and not particularly pleasant. If you stick to the kind of default, like so you're not doing like custom like column widths and things like that, so it's a very fixed grid, then I think things work quite well. But if you start pulling things around, then again, responsively, we don't have responsive controls, which I think is a bit of a problem for a block like this, personally.
I briefly had a go with it a few weeks ago, just a little play with it, and it was buggy. I can't remember the bugs that happened, but I just thought that doesn't really work very well. I don't know if that's still the case now, but obviously it's been released, so one would assume it's relatively stable. Yeah.
So there's that. So I mean, it's there. It's hopefully going to be improved on and get better. I don't know if I would use it today. I think I'd probably still reach for something like the advanced columns plugin. Yeah, I think to do this,
and that's because that does the same thing, but isn't buggy. I guess.
I did find it buggy when I used it. That was a little while ago. But it does give you responsive controls.
Got you.
Yeah.
Right.
So you have much more control over that layout.
Over what happens on a mobile screen size, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Responsive controls. That keeps coming back up, doesn't it?
It's not gonna go away. Like because
it's not.
When you introduce tools like this, and like we just talked about like negative margins and things, the more of these kind of advanced layout tools that you add, you have to have a way to handle smaller, like different screen sizes. Like it's just we have to be marching in that direction. I just don't see really the resistance to it. There's GitHub tickets all about people arguing about whether we should or shouldn't have responsive controls, and the core team are very much like, we don't want to give that. But
what's the reasoning for that? I wonder.
I think the level of complexity,
right?
Yeah,
already gone down that road.
Complication, and yeah, I mean the UI. I mean, I think there are ways, like every other page builder has them. So there are ways that you can build a UI that works and that people are familiar with, I think, personally. But I mean, in the early days of Gutenberg, I was really anti-responsive controls. I was like, I hope they never happen, because I think as a theme developer, I should be taking care of that stuff on behalf of my clients. Like they should still just be basically adding content and not really having to think about how things look on mobile, because that's not their job. They're marketers or whatever. But as these tools progress and we are giving people margin controls, padding controls, grid blocks, whatever else, I just think if we're going down that route, you have to give them the whole thing. You have to give them
the whole thing.
Yeah,
you can't be half in. You've got to be.
I think so.
Yeah, you've got to be all in on that.
Yeah, so I think they should come. Elliot, a good point here from Elliot. Responsive or intrinsic. So I'm not really an expert on the difference between the two. I get the sense that responsive design is when you are designing for specific breakpoints, and intrinsic design is when you use tools like Flexbox and Grid and container queries, etc., so that each individual kind of element on a site is responsive within itself. So you can, using things like clamp and min max and all those fancy kind of CSS things. I would say, Elliot, how on earth are we going to do that in WordPress? Like, I think responsive controls are a level of complexity already. Like, I would love somehow to build in container queries for things, so I can say, I can design a pattern, like a little self-contained component module pattern or whatever, and say, at this size of this pattern, I want it to look like this, I want it to look like this. So I can drop that thing anywhere on the website, whether it's full width or in a tiny column or whatever, and that thing, that module or pattern will look good, because it'll understand the context of itself, which is what a kind of container query does. But I have no idea how you build that into UI. I just think that's a way harder challenge than responsive controls, and we're not even going down that route. So it'd be interesting. If you've got any ideas, I'd love to talk to you about that one day, Elliot, because that's where we should try to get to with design, but very, very difficult, in my opinion.
I'm not quite sure what intrinsic means. Sorry, I don't understand.
I just spent 5 minutes trying to explain it, so I don't know. I don't know how else to explain it.
All right, let's forget that then. Forget it. I don't quite get responsive. I think I understand. Like, it looks different at different sizes of screen.
Yes,
it responds to the size of the screen.
Yeah.
So how is intrinsic different to that?
It responds to itself, like its own content, or the size of itself. Things within it. So like I can take not a screen size. I can take a div and squish it and like make it wider and smaller, and the stuff within it changes based on the width of the div.
Well,
screen
that
size
sounds like container queries.
Exactly the same. What's that?
That sounds like container queries, which is what you mentioned, which is
container queries is one of the tools.
Right.
Yeah. But you can say things, CSS gives us a lot of power now to say, for Flexbox, for instance, right? You can say this particular column or item or whatever, or Flexbox, what are they called? The flex item itself.
Right, yeah.
You can set its width based on all sorts of things. Yeah, and you can say, don't go any smaller than this and don't go any bigger than this. So it's not responsive in the sense that it's got nothing to do with the screen size.
Right.
It's to do with itself and its own context. I think that's the difference. Someone else can explain it. Look it up. Someone will explain it way better than I just attempted to.
So correct me if I'm wrong then. If you go down the intrinsic route, don't you need intrinsic controls?
Yes. And that's what I was just saying. I have no idea what that would look like.
Whether you need responsive controls or intrinsic controls, you still need some form of control to set what this does at different sizes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No one's saying otherwise.
Oh, well, I don't see what the difference is really, but as in the resistance seems to be providing more controls to people that's complex. And you need to do that either way you go, really.
Yeah.
Which is hard, essentially.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I think Elliot's just kind of basically saying that we're having a discussion about whether we add responsive controls or not. No one's talking about whether we add intrinsic controls.
Okay.
And that would be an interesting conversation about like what that might actually look like. Yeah. But I think it would be much, much more difficult personally. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Any other features that you've used, found, liked, and anyone else, by the way, that's listening, let us know what you're enjoying, maybe what you're not enjoying.
I'm pretty interested in the overrides. That's here now. Pattern overrides, which we've talked about before, and pattern styles. I'm kind of interested in. Are they called pattern styles? I really struggle to keep up with like the terminology of everything. Styles for groups of blocks. I don't know what the actual official name is. Set styles for groups of blocks. Again, I've heard that that's a little bit buggy whenever you actually try to use it, and it's not as maybe fully developed as people like us would maybe need it to be to use. So this is to be able to say, like, I want to add the dark style to this group so that the background is dark blue and the text is white and the button is green. And on this one over here, I want to add the alternative style to this group. And no matter what's in it, you can control like the colors and whatever else to style that differently. Maybe the titles are italic within this section, things like that. But I think it's quite limited. I don't think it just goes as far as we would need it to. You don't have the full control, so you'd have to step in with some extra custom CSS and blah blah blah. So, but it's something I definitely want to play with.
Is that like saying, if I'm confused. So if I've got a group, and so the group has a block style applied to it, is that correct? So
I think that's how it works.
Yeah. And then you're saying that the my group style for a group has specific styling applied when, for example, I drop a button in, or when I drop this particular block in, or this particular block. What happens if I drop a block in there that isn't styled by the pattern? Because you do theme JSON, don't you? It won't do anything. So almost, that's how I'm confused. It's almost like, here's the styling for this very specific pattern, but actually you can go and change the pattern and therefore the styles won't work very well. That's why I'm a bit confused. I would have thought like you have to drop these things on the page, and when you do, you've got these color options or these styling options to change it for. But it almost seems I can go rogue in the pattern and then the styles won't work.
Well, you can add anything you want within the group.
Yeah.
It's just that the defaults are different.
Right.
So the font color, default font color could be different, or the default font sizes, I'm guessing, could be different, or the default whatever. Default button color, default button style, or whatever, I think can be different within those groups. I like the idea of this. I really do.
What's the UI look like for changing the?
I don't know actually.
The color,
I haven't played with that one.
Right.
Played with that.
Where do I choose dark or light? I suppose it must show somewhere.
Yeah.
The reason I say that is because I can just imagine someone dropping the pattern on and saying, "Oh, I don't mind like everything to be dark," and then going in and starting editing all the colors, and then actually you could have just pressed that button. Like, is it obvious that this thing has these color options. I'm sure it is, but I haven't looked at it.
They're missing. I've just thought they're missing a trick with these like announcement blog posts, because what would be really cool is under like the section where it says refined publish flow or negative margins, there's like try it now. Imagine if you could just click a button and like, because we've got all those magical like WordPress Playground and InstaWP kind of services now. How cool would it be if you just clicked a button and it just took you right to that thing?
Yeah,
with like tooltips, or even, you know, I know WordPress is, I guess, trying to stay away from that kind of thing, but that would be super cool, wouldn't it? Like, I wonder how that works. Like, you just asked that question, like, what's the UI look like? It'd be so cool if I could have just hit a button and just be like, looks like this, you know. But
that's the post that we're kind of looking at for the big things that are coming, that have arrived in WordPress 6.6. I must admit, I expected to be able to go like overrides and then just click read more, like learn all about them.
That as well. Absolutely.
But I can't. So,
do you know what's interesting as well? Like, just before we started recording, I just Googled it, like WordPress 6.6. So, like, I found it really hard to find this page. So, this didn't come up. So, I got, what are the ones that came up? So, there's wordpress.org/documentation, WordPress version 6.6 came up. Make WordPress.org core 6.6 came up.
Yeah.
Core 2024, blah, 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 blah. WordPress 6.6 field guide came up. Something from Yoast came up. Something from, you know, Kinsta came up. Something from, there's a lot of different places. Something from WordPress.com, there was a page on that. I was like, where's the bloody main release page? Like, that's nobody's fault in particular, but it was just like, it's kind of interesting. There's loads of places to kind of look when there's a release like this.
Parts of that page remind me very much of like the Apple releases when you see them. So if you go to the and much more part of that page,
I love that.
You get this like grid of features, and I think that's very Apple-like, because they do that when they show you, like, they've talked about the product for like 20 minutes, and then they put this screen up with all the features in a grid and things like that.
Yes.
So it's kind of
you could do a layout. You could do a layout like that with the grid block.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a really good example, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, whereas if you did it with columns, like I see that as 3 columns.
But you could do it, yes. Yeah, you could do it as columns.
But it wouldn't flow very well, would it, like you said? So it's probably better to do it as a grid, that thing.
Yeah.
I am quite excited about and Tim's put this, I'll just put this on comment on the screen. Where's it gone? No, not that one. Someone's auto-scrolled it. That one. Auto rollback support for failed updates. That looks nice. Tim says it's really quite reliable as well. So if a plugin fails to update correctly, it'll roll back to its original version. Or I'm not sure. Can you roll it back yourself, or do you have to do that? Anyway, but it certainly seems like a more robust system. Maybe CrowdStrike needed some of that sort of system in their systems today.
Just on that, and Tim, if you're still with us, please do let me know. It says safely have rollbacks if anything goes wrong. What does anything mean? Like, is it just if your site white screens?
I suspect that's a marketing term, Keith.
Yeah, but like, it's not detecting if anything goes wrong, because it's not looking at our, you know, payment system and to make sure a transaction goes through, or if the button's turned white, or if I know it's a ridiculous expectation. I don't expect that, but I am genuinely interested. Like, what does anything goes wrong mean? Only fatal errors.
Fatal errors, like, I don't know, like 400 responses or maybe 500 responses. Not 200
interesting if there was some way that it could detect non-fatal errors, like just an increase in errors, like even the non-fatal ones, and just say, no, there's too much that's a bit dodgy about this. Yeah, we'll roll it back and let you know. But I mean, that's better than nothing. I mean, that's a great improvement.
Absolutely.
It's really good. Yeah, we covered overrides. Apparently, there's a lot of work being done on the performance side of things, performance of the editor and the front end, which is always really good to hear. Lots of accessibility improvements, which is always good to hear. Yeah, there's a lot going on. I saw someone tweeted earlier, like, they got confused because the update button has changed to save, I think, or something like that, and they're like, am I going mad? Like, how do I update this? It's like, so I don't know if that's across the board or if that's on a particular type of screen. But but that caught someone out, which is quite funny. Custom shadows, I think, is quite cool. So I can define shadows in my theme now, which I've done before for projects. I've got like, tight shadows where it makes something look very close to the page, or like long shadows where it's like looks like it's really set back and it's nice and like faded out. So you can set custom versions of those, so then people can just choose, I want this group to have a particular type of shadow. So I thought that was really cool, just from a designy point of view. Aspect ratio presets, I think, is cool. Again, like for certain clients, we've had like custom aspect ratios for images within the site. I think that always looks nice if things are tidy in that sense. So yeah,
that is nice. It's a nice simple feature that's really useful, isn't it? Actually, aspect ratios, like being able to set just easily being able to set some aspect ratios that work for your theme and your design.
Yeah, it's good. So I think pretty positive. We'll see when we get properly stuck in how many of these features we can make use of. Hopefully lots of them.
Yeah.
I saw there was something Frank and Nick Wilmot were having a conversation on X, and he was basically saying, sort of in response to what was happening with us with that problem, he was basically saying, yeah, this is why I tell people not to use hybrid themes anymore, because if you were on a full FSE theme, you wouldn't be having these issues. I'm like, okay, I don't know why not, because I could have just still written all that custom CSS, but there you go. Maybe his argument is that I wouldn't have written any of the custom CSS. I would have done everything in theme JSON, and therefore everything would have just continued to work. But
yeah, there was also a big discussion with Nick in the tweets about template parts and patterns and footers and headers and the differences between them.
Well,
pretty much tagged in it. Yeah, but
yeah,
I can't contribute to that argument because I still don't know really.
Well, exactly. Like we had that discussion on this show not so long ago. Like you'd gone through exactly the same thing. So
clearly it's not obvious. Yeah, what the differences are because people don't know. But there you go.
No.
Anyway, but I didn't get involved because I had nothing to add to the conversation. Basically, I can't add to that conversation.
Yeah, fair enough.
People that know, and if you don't know, you don't seem to know. But we'll get there in the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Super.
Anything else?
I think we should wrap it up there. That was a good length of episode. As always, thank you so much for joining us, whether it was live on YouTube, after the show on YouTube, or on the podcast, or however you've found us and listened. It's always great to have you along. We will not be around next week. Hopefully the week after. So stay tuned. And if you don't want to miss it when we're back, do consider subscribing either on YouTube or as the podcast. And hopefully we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.